What's up, kids? All right, so week like 1700 of quarantine. We're here again. Just kidding, but it kind of feels that way. I can't wait till we can get back together in church and in our classroom and play games together and all that. But for now, just sit up and listen to me talk, all right? So last week, Brother Dwight talked to you about Solomon and how when the Lord asked him what he wanted from him, he said, I want understanding, I want wisdom, and God gave it to him. He was able to build the big, beautiful house of God. They called it Solomon's temple. He had all the wisdom. God gave it to him freely. But Solomon started to make a mistake, and what he did was he took many wives from many different places. So in the law of Moses, Moses had told the children of Israel, so one day you're going to want a king, you're going to want to be like the other nations, but whatever king you get, he should not take more than one wife. And Solomon began to do that. That's how they made treaties. So he would go to a country to make a treaty with them and to sign the treaty, kind of how they did. The king would give a daughter to Solomon or something like that. So Solomon began to marry many different wives from many different places with many different gods. And those wives he had turned his heart against God and towards other gods. And so Solomon started making very big mistake. Number one, too many wives. Number two, serving other gods. So God became very angry with Solomon and told him because of this, he was going to take the kingdom. He was only going to leave Solomon with one tribe. And God had promised King David, his father, Solomon's father, that his seed would reign forever. So that means a child of David or grandchild would always reign. But because of Solomon, God had to retract that promise he made to King David. You see, the difference between David and Solomon, because we learned a few weeks ago that David made some big mistakes too with the woman he took away from her husband, then had her husband killed. But the difference was that David, even though he made mistakes, his heart was always after God, and he always turned back to the one true God. But Solomon's heart had been turned away from God to other gods. So God was very angry, and he said this. He said, I'm going to take your kingdom and give it to your servant. So and only for David's sake was the one tribe going to be left with Solomon. So this man served under Solomon. His name was Jeroboam. And Jeroboam was who God chose to give the kingdom to. The prophet Ahijah found him in a field alone, and he took his cloak and he cut it into 12 pieces, Jeroboam's cloak, and he gave 10 of those pieces to Jeroboam. It was symbolic that he was going to be in charge of 10 of the tribes of Israel. So when Solomon heard about this, he was very angry and he sought to kill Jeroboam because he was taking his kingdom, which wasn't really true. God took the kingdom. But he sought to kill Jeroboam. So Jeroboam fled into Egypt and he hid there. Now Solomon still reigned for 40 more years after that, and then he died. When he died, he put his son Rehoboam in as king. So now Solomon's dead, Rehoboam's king, and Jeroboam hears that down in Egypt, and he says, okay, I guess I can go back now because Solomon's dead. So he goes back to Israel, and he asks to talk to the king. So Jeroboam says, all right, come and talk to me. Rehoboam, the king of Israel, calls Jeroboam. Those names are too much for me. Rehoboam calls him and says, all right, come and talk to me. So Jeroboam goes in there and he says, if you will make the grievous service and the heavy yoke lighter than your father did at the end of his reign, we will serve you. So Jeroboam comes and says, I know all this happened with your dad, all that stuff, we're servants, but if you'll be a better master than him, we will serve you gladly, even though all this stuff has happened. Excuse me, my face is and Rehoboam's like, all right, come back in 3 days and I'll make my decision. So in that time, Rehoboam goes and he asked the old men what he should do. Now, the old men were probably his advisors, people that had worked with Solomon, and they said, if you treat these people right, they'll serve you the rest of their days. And they advised him to treat him better than Solomon did at the end of his life. But Rehoboam decided to go ask the younger men as well. The younger men said, you should tell him you're going to think my father was a big sissy. oh, I'm going to be 10 times harder than my father. Just get ready for it. My father chastened you with whips, but I will chasten you with scorpions. So the young men convinced Rehoboam to tell Jeroboam and the children of Israel, I'm going to be worse than my father. So after 3 days, the men of Israel came back, and the king talked to them very sternly. He's like, my father chastened you with whips, but I'm going to chasten you with scorpions. And so, because of that, the children of Israel went to their tents, and they were like, we can't live like this. So, just like that, they were like, that's it, we're not going to live under that. They took Jeroboam, and they made him king. And that's how the children of Israel were divided into 2 nations. So, the tribe of Judah and Benjamin stayed with Jeroboam, with Rehoboam, Solomon's son. 2 tribes called Judah, and the other tribes were Israel. Now, Solomon forgot what God had done for him. He forgot what he had done for his father, what he had done for him in giving him all the wisdom he needed, and he turned to the advice of younger men. And if I can encourage you with anything today is always turn to God. Don't ever forget what he's done for you. He's the only one that knows the very beginning from the very end, and he knows what's best, not the people around you. He sees everything. So don't ever forget what God has done for you, like Solomon did. Solomon had it all. God had handed it all. He had all the wisdom, all the understanding, all the riches. He had everything, but he forgot that God was the only one that had ever given it to him. So this week, remember to not forget that God has everything that you need.